I'm going to hit on today is how you can start and grow your pressure washing business. And so I know everybody loves a pressure washer, right? And so the number one thing is you either need a pressure washer or there's two ways that you can clean. And so we use a pressure washer to clean, but we really don't use pressure. And what is pressure? So as I'm talking here, you will hear me say one of two words, either pressure or PSI, pounds per square inch. So that's how much pressure you're shooting in a square inch is PSI. So you may see a pressure washer that says 2,800 PSI, 1,500 PSI, 4,000 PSI. So that's 4,000 of pounds per square inch is what a 4,000 PSI means. So it means it's just, that's, if you use a red tip, it's going to eat everything at 4,000 PSI. And so you'll hear me talk about PSI, and you're going to hear me talk about GPMs, or gallons per minute. If you hear GPH, that's gallons per hour. We don't talk about hours, we talk about minutes. So it'll be GPM, gallons per minute. So what does that mean? Well, a lot of times we'll see a pressure washer and we're like, ooh, look at this pressure washer. This thing's got 4,000 PSI. I'm going to be able to clean anything. And in this business of a pressure washing business, PSI means absolutely nothing. Most of the time, we are cleaning with 80 to 100 PSI, pounds per square inch. 80 to 100 pounds per square inch. And so what that means is, as we are talking about 80 to 100 PSI, then what that tells is we don't need a lot of pressure. When we talk about pressure, causes problems. So just remember that. Pressure causes problems. The higher the pressure you are, the more likely you are to screw something up. Now, on the other hand, the gallons per minute makes us go faster. So we want high GPM and low pressure. So if a lot of times you'll see a pressure washer, the ones at Lowe's or Home Depot's, and it'll say 4,000 PSI and 2.7 gallons per minute. And that's going to take you forever to be able to clean the way you should clean. Now, it is going to be really awesome, and you're going to have so much pressure that it can literally kill you. I know, how crazy would you think that a pressure washer can hurt you? But yes, when we talk about pressure, high pressure causes damage to vinyl siding, it causes damage to windows, it causes damage to flowers, it causes damage to you. Did you know that if you inject your finger with a pressure washer or inject it into your foot and it breaks the skin, and it only takes 100 PSI to break your skin, that you can either A, lose the finger, lose the hand, lose the arm, or it can get into your bloodstream and go into your heart, and then you stop living, you die. And so this is something that you have to remember as you start and grow a pressure washing business. Now, can you do a 2.7 pressure washer and make money? Sure you can. I have a guy out of New York. He had a 2.7 gallon pressure washer and a pump up sprayer, and he did $150,000 in a year. And so don't give me the excuses that you need all of this high-end equipment to go make money. But equipment is something that you need, and it is something that you will have to look at when we are growing this pressure washing business. So with that, I just kind of wanted to get to PSI and GPM so that way you understand what we're talking about when we're talking about PSI and GPMs. So when you're starting a pressure washing business, I really do recommend a 4 gallon a minute, 4 gallon per minute, or 4 GPM or higher. Now, the higher the GPM, the faster you clean. So for instance, if you're washing a house with with a 4 gallon a minute, and it takes you 2 hours, and you go to a 5.5 gallon minute, it's going to take you an hour and a half. And if you go to an 8 gallon a minute, you'll get it done in about 45 minutes to an hour. And it's literally about the flow. It's not about the pressure, it's about the flow. How fast can we get the chemical on the house and how fast will we get the chemical back off the house. And so this is something that you really have to think about when we are growing a business, or what equipment we are looking at. So again, higher the GPMs, the faster you'll get done. Now, I'm not saying to go out here and buy this big dog right here, this $10,000 hot water unit, because that thing is not going to make you money, right? It's going to look pretty in your garage, and it's not going to make you no money, because you got to be able to sell to be able to make you money. Again, PSI means nothing. PSI means absolutely nothing. You can literally get one of these small ones here with an 8 gallon a minute on it. It'll put it at about 2,500 PSI, and you can literally clean with it. And so PSI doesn't mean a whole lot at the end. Should you get a hot pressure washer or cold pressure washer? Well, the only way that a hot pressure washer comes in the hand, if you're doing a lot of gum removal and oil removal. That is where we need the hot water. Now, if you're up here in the north like I am, I actually used hot water. I actually used warm water. I would just turn the burner all the way down, and I would use warm water when we're in these 35 and 40 degree days. Now, but I also did a lot of commercial work, so I didn't do a lot. Usually you don't get a lot of phone calls in the wintertime because nobody's outside, and if nobody's outside looking at their house, guess what? They don't know that it's dirty. So that is why it is important that you understand of why you need a hot water for here. GPM equals efficient once you have an understanding and routine. And I agree 100%. Just because you have 10 GPM or 8 GPM doesn't make you faster if you don't have a routine, and if you're running back into the truck 55 times because you don't have the right systems put in place to understand how to clean. That is 100% correct. The engine sizes. You have a couple different engine sizes here. You got the Honda 390 down here. This is on typically your 4 gallon a minute and less. They work amazing. They're built and they'll last forever. Usually the pump will go bad before the pressure washer will ever go bad. And so that is a good motor. And then you also have either the Honda 630, you have the Honda 690, or you have the Honda E800 or whatever. It's a big boy. And so all that does is it helps get your PSI up, and it helps get your higher GPMs. Usually you will only see these on 4 gallons or more less. There is people that will put a 5.5 or 8 gallon a minute on this pump. It will work that way, but it's a lot on that little motor. It really needs the bigger motor. So that is what the hot versus cold means as we're talking there. The next thing we need, I like to set my truck up with 150 feet pre-connected hoses. 150 feet pre-connected will get me about 95% of all the houses in my area. I will carry an extra 50 feet that I will have to break out on that 5 to 10% to be able to get to the rest of the house. And so I'm all about efficiency. And so if you're pulling 250 feet of hose out every time, the problem with that is that's an extra 100 feet that you're cranking up or that you're rolling up. That's taking you extra time, and it's taking extra energy. And when you use extra energy, it's back to the being efficient, and that is why we want to be able to do this. The next thing is should you buy, when I first started, it was in the 50-foot sections, and then everybody went to the 200-foot sections, and it all looks pretty, and it looks good on your reel, and it doesn't mess it up. But the problem of it is when you're an hour away from your house and you blow a 200-foot hose and you don't have no more hose, you have to roll it up and go home. And yes, hose is going to blow. There is no perfect hose out there. Some hose will last 2-3 years. Some hose will last 3 months. Some hose will last 2 weeks. It just depends on if there's weak spots in it, and that can be a problem. Non-marking hose, I like to use the color gray hose because there's really no such thing as non-marking hose. Non-marking hose is something that I never agreed on it because it will mark. A pressure washer is got pumps in it, and so it's got 6 little pumps in it. It ain't got 6 pumps in it, but it does got 6 little plungers in it that make the pump. And each time that goes around there, it's sitting there with that hose, and it's making that hose do this. And that's what causes that to mark the concrete. And so it'll leave marks on the concrete, it'll leave marks wherever you got that hose running at. R1, you'll hear this called, this R1 or R2 PSI hose. You'll hear this in a couple different ways. R1 is single braided hose. That means there's one set of wires down through the hose. Now, just because R1 is a lot lighter than R2, because R2 actually has 2 sets of wires going down the hose, so it's double braided going down the hose. So a lot of times we think that R2 is going to last a lot longer than R1, and that's not the case, because usually what happens is that wire will break somewhere, or it gets a hole in it and it starts rusting, and that's what causes the pressure to shoot out of that hole. And R1 and R2, it is definitely something that you want to use R2 for hot water. If you're using hot water, then you want to use R2 hose. If you're wanting to use R1, you can use R1. It is only rated for 4,000 PSI generally, and then R2 is 6,000. Now, there is another set of hose, and R2 hose for a 50-foot section is about 5 pounds heavier, 5 to 10 pounds heavier. So again, efficiency, that don't sound like that extra 5 pounds is a lot, but every time you're pulling that hose, 5 pounds adds up. And so that's the difference between those two hoses. There is another hose that is super light, and it's called Uberflex. Uberflex does work well. It does get a little bit of a twist in it sometimes. I don't know why it does, but it gives a twist in it. But it's super light. It's got fibers running through it, and it is rated for 3,500 PSI. And it is pretty cool little hose, and it does work pretty well for not having to pull a whole lot for that. Garden hose. The garden hose I like to use is depending on how far I am and what size pressure washer I'm using, it's either a 5/8 for 4 gallon a minute or less, or 5.5 for more. And so what the reason why the difference is between these two is friction loss. And so what is friction loss? Friction loss is, as it's the size of the orifice or the hole, the bigger the hole is, the less friction it takes. So if you have a smaller hole, it's got a lot more friction, and it doesn't allow you to flow as much. And so that's why the 3/4 inch garden hose will allow you to flow a lot more than the 5/8 hose. And this comes into play of, if you're trying to run an 8 or 10 gallon a minute machine, that 5/8 hose will maybe not flow. It won't flow the same amount as the 3/4. And so that's why we go with the 3/4 inch hose, because the flow rate is a lot better there. And so I've got this little nifty chart right here, and you can see right here that if we have a 5/8 hose and we are flowing 4 gallons a minute, right? 4 gallons a minute of 5/8 hose, we have friction loss of 7 PSI per 100 feet. Or if we're in 3/4, we only have 3 PSI per 100 feet. So it's a lot less. Now, if we go down here to the 8 gallon a minute and we have a 5/8 hose, we have 325 pounds per square inch that we're losing. And if we are at 3/4, we're only at 10. So it's less than half the friction loss. And so that's why it's important that as we choose our hose, we understand how friction loss works. This also works for if you're looking at soft wash stuff, and a lot of people put a 1/2 inch on a 5 gallon a minute pump. At a 1/2 inch, you have 34 inches of or 34 pounds per square inch per 100 feet, versus if you have 5/8 hose, it's only 10. And so that's why a lot of times you will shoot further out of a 12 volt system with a 5/8 hose versus a 1/2 inch hose. So that's some things here that you can understand about PSI and all of that good stuff there for your things of there. So that is some things about the hose and the pressure washer as we're talking about what type of equipment that you may need. Now, next thing is hose reels. Again, it's not something that you gotta have. It's something that can make the job get done a lot faster. And so hose reels are definitely something that you will want to do. Now, hand crank versus electric is hand crank, a good hose reel. You're looking about $300 to $400 now for a good hand cranked hose reel. Or the electric hose reel, you're looking about, I don't even know what they are. I'd say they're about $800 to $1,000 per hose reel, and that might be cheap now. Back in the day, they were about $700, $800. Now I know everything has went up, and so that is definitely something that you can look at for hose reels. Again, if you are old and you don't want to waste a lot of energy and you have a little bit extra money, you can go with electric. Now, what I will say about on that same thing is if you have extra money, don't go putting all your money in your equipment and don't put no money into your marketing, because that is a dumb mistake that you will make. Just because you have nice equipment doesn't mean that you are going to grow your business and keep growing. And then the last thing you need is a surface cleaner. This will help you clean your concrete a lot faster. The general rule is 1 gallon. If your pressure washer is a 4 gallon a minute, so 1 gallon per 4 inches. So if you have a 4 gallon a minute pressure washer, that means you can get a 16-inch surface cleaner. If you go bigger than that, you're going to have to really slow it down, or it's going to leave zebra stripes in it. And so that's why we want to make sure we're doing that. There is a 2-bar versus a 4-bar tip. And so the 4-bar tip is for 8 gallon a minute and more. So you can have 4 tips on that bar. And so it's 2 on each side, and it actually works better as that thing's spinning around. It does a lot better for that. Floaters versus wheels. I don't like the wheels because you can't get them into the corners and they like to fall off of stuff. And so I like the floaters better than the wheels. Start cheap if you have to, and I agree 100%. Don't go buy the Taj Mahal of $20,000, $30,000, and you got this big payment of, it's just a payment of $500 or $1,000, because right now in this time of the year, you will be losing you'll be losing it. I have an employee crank power hose reels. Yes, I agree. The problem with electric hose reels is if they're outside, they get chemicals on them. Those motors, they quit working, and so then you have issues along with that there. So this is what a basic setup looks like, and with this basic setup, you can do everything that you need to do you can do everything, house washing, you can do concrete cleaning, you can do deck cleaning, you can do everything except roof cleaning. And so basically the only thing that I didn't hit on was a downstream injector, which is this thing right here, a little 5 gallon bucket. So I would get you a 4 gallon a minute pressure washer. You can get them for about $1,200 to $1,500. You can get you a downstreamer. You can get it for about 20 bucks. You can get you a bucket, $10. You can get you a J-rod. This is called a J-rod. It has different orifices on it, different size orifices on it. You can get it for about 40 or 50 bucks. You can get a surface cleaner. You can get the cheap one for about $200 to $250. You can get the high-end one. You're about $1,000, or $700 to $1,000. 150 feet of garden hose, 200 feet of pressure washing hose, and the pressure washing gun that usually comes with the pressure washer. And this here is a basic system so that you can start and grow your pressure washing business. This is something that you can do, and that is why I wanted to hit on this. And then someone did say about the bypass. So here is the downstream injector. Again, this is a tool that you will need. This here is the J-rod that I was talking about. And so I'll just talk a little bit about it. There is 2 different J-rods, or a couple different J-rods you can do. There's an M5 twist. There's all kinds of stuff. The M5 twist is this right here, down here. That way you can shoot it. But the only thing, I always like the J-rod, because if the M5 twist, you come down too far and you're on straight shoot, you will mark and you will pencil that house, and then you will have issues. So that's why I like to do the J-rod. These are the 00 is the spray pattern. So a 00 is a straight shoot, a 05 is a 5 degree, and a 25 is a 25-degree spray pattern. The 40 is the orifice size. So it's 40 centimeters. If it's 60, it's just bigger. So that's the difference between those two there. And then the only other thing, so if you want to know how a downstreamer works, you have the garden hose comes into the pressure washer. Out of the pressure washer, from the pressure wash hose, it goes through the downstream. And then this is your pressure wash hose hooked on here. And then this here can either go into a 5-gallon bucket, it can go into a big tank. And so that is how you are able to pressure wash. And then the last thing here is a bypass. So this here is the downstream injector right here. And so it comes through, and you can turn this handle off here, which will allow, if you turn this handle on, it will allow water to bypass this, and so it won't draw chemical. If I turn it closed like this, it will force that water through that downstream injector, which will then will pull a suction and cause it to draw the chemical, and that is how we're able to put our chemical on the house. And so this is how you're able to do that. And I know this is, a lot of people don't realize that if you got a 4-gallon a minute, you really don't need this bypass. It's not going to make that much of a difference. When you get up into the 8 and 10 gallon a minute, this bypass makes a huge difference. And what I mean by a huge difference is when you go to rinse, because spraying the chemical on the house, you can do it with a 4-gallon a minute. It's the rinsing that makes it the fastest, and so that gives you all your flow. If you make it run through that downstream injector through everything, you cut your flow by a lot. You'll cut it by 10 feet. Like if you're just shooting it up in the air and you shoot through the downstream injector, you'll probably get about 30 feet. If you take and go through the bypass, it'll go about 40 feet. And so that's how much more flow you're able to get by getting out of that downstream injector. So that's just something to think about as we are doing this here. A ball valve with a swivel is worth it all day long. I agree 100%. A ball valve, if you look at this ball valve right here, I didn't put that on there, and that's a good point. I would say that too. You should have a ball valve at the end of your pressure wash hose, so that way you can switch out to your tips or switch out your gun. You can rinse, you can do all of that, and I would agree 100% on the ball valve. The swivel does make it nice. It's about the Mosomatic swivel, I think they're about 40, 50 bucks. Actually, they might be more than that, $50, $60. So I'm going off old prices. So if the prices are higher now, don't shoot me. I'm kind of going off of what I haven't bought one in a while. And I know everything has went up. So start cheap if you have to. And this is something that's important. And I know I push this a lot, and I know I've seen the younger kid on here. Don't go buying a bunch of equipment. Literally buy that. You don't need to bypass. You need a 4-gallon a minute. You can get into a pressure washing business for about $2,000, $2,500, $3,000. If you ain't got that much money, then you go rent a pressure washer. You can go rent a 4-gallon a minute pressure washer and a surface cleaner for about $200. So go get you $1,000 day. Go rent you a $200 pressure washer and go rent it, right? And until you can buy it. So that way, then you can pay cash. You don't owe nobody nothing, and that is something that will make you and keep growing. Because what makes people go out of business is they buy all this equipment, and guess what? Did you know every wintertime in November up here in our area, October, November, December, January, and February, it gets cold. I didn't know if you knew that or not. And when it's cold, the grass ain't mowing and people ain't outside. And when people ain't outside, they're not looking at their house. And when they're not looking at their house, they don't even know if it's dirty. And it can be completely dirty and they don't know that it's dirty. And so that's why I tell people to don't go so far in debt. Don't go buy a bunch of equipment on leasing. Don't do that, because you will see people go out of business because they do, and then they can't afford it when the payments come due, and they didn't set money aside for the winter months. And even if you are in the South, I'm going to give you a little heads up. January and February, it doesn't matter where you're at in the country, it's dead, right? It's slow. Even in Florida, if you don't have a good set of business and a good set of clients already, when it comes January and February, you ain't working, even in Florida. Now, if you have a good set of clients, you have good things, then it will work for you, I promise you. So, them are some things to think about as we are growing our business.